Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're at. We'll give folks a couple minutes to join in here. We'll start after a couple minutes after the top of the hour.
Got people coming from all over the place. Look at this. I like the, thank you for introducing yourselves.
Yeah. We got a number of folks, Mark, looks like from Canada all the way down through Texas there. So we got north to south covered in many regards.
Opening day. Okay, we got one baseball fan who's dedicated business continuity professional. Nice, nice. Yeah, I could see trying to pick out questions on that chat would be a challenge. So I'm glad we've got people watching in the background as questions come in.
Maybe we go ahead and give it another 30 seconds or so, Mark, then we can dive in.
Oh, another Pacific Northwest there.
There
Here
we
where
go.
Kurt is.
Yeah, exactly. Folks from all around, looks like North America. We may have some international folks as well.
Yeah, mostly in these time zones. More,
Yeah.
quite a few Canadians. Nice to see. Sunny Florida.
Well,
Well, I'm in sunny Green Bay today, so that's something. Which actually makes me think I probably should have turned on a light. I'm getting shadows.
all righty. Well, Mark, should we go ahead and dive on in?
Let's do it.
Okay. We'll pop to this next slide. Thanks all for joining today. Thanks for joining Mark and I. My name is Kurt Blomdahl. I am a principal customer success manager here at Fusion. I've been at Fusion for just about 3.5 years, supporting many of our current clients in their ongoing work with Fusion. I've primarily focused on clients that are working in healthcare or insurance sector, and I spent 5 years before coming to Fusion at a local health insurance company supporting their business continuity team and many of their related activities, including third-party resilience, some system administration, ENS systems, and the BC and DR program administration as well. So welcome today. And Mark?
Yeah, so I'm Mark Elsenheimer. I am by title a senior client service advisor. I think of that as a consultant. Within Fusion, we're a software company primarily, but we also have advisors who have been practitioners and interface with our technical configuration folks. That's my current role. I actually next month, I am less than a month away from 5 full years at Fusion, and actually was a contractor with them before that. So prior to that, multiple corporate experiences between running a program, consulting, running a program, consulting, kind of back and forth. I came up through data centers and disaster recovery, but since before Y2K, have been primarily focused on business continuity, crisis management, and emergency response planning. So nice to meet you. Well, nice to virtually meet all of you.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So a couple of items before we get started. I'll run through the agenda here in a second, but we do have the chat section, the Q&A section there. So please feel free to interact in the chat. We'll take a look at those through our time today as we go along. So please feel free to put questions and that you'd like to ask in the Q&A in the chat. We'll address probably some of those at the end of our session. But today our topic is from requirement to resilient. So what we're going to start with today is building from the ground up, a foundational view at building a business continuity or building a continuity planning program, really focusing on some of those foundational items that we think what a good or what a great resilience program is built off of. Then we'll cover a couple of other areas. Next up will be engaging the business, whether that's our end users, our management, our executives, engaging the business on how we can get them involved in our resilience activities, because we know that we can't do it alone, whether we have a small team or a large team. We'll look at some KPIs and reporting of some of those metrics that we might suggest we take a look at in your organization at different levels. And lastly, we'll finish with a couple of continuity considerations, maybe some of those items that we have been thinking about on the back burner that we might not have thought of recently that we want to bring back up and take a look at. So again, please feel free to put those questions in the chat and we'll take a look at those as we go. All right, Mark, I'll jump into the next slide here and turn that one over to you.
Yeah, so just to make sure we're talking from the same place, and I said, as we were developing these slides, I'm like, conveniently, this lines up very well with the DRI professional practices. Somewhat abbreviated, we're not showing all 10, but just to talk about what we're talking about when we're talking planning is primarily around the BIA. Maybe you do a risk assessment as well, but the business impact assessment through BC planning, testing and exercising, responding to actual live crises. Those are kind of, we didn't show the circle where it's a life cycle, but often, as I'm sure you all, many of you do in your programs, once you've tested, you want to go back, reassess, is your BIA current? Is your BC plan up to date? Do another test, stress things a little bit more, involve multiple parts of the organization, et cetera. And we will touch a bit, at least when I'm talking about metrics a little bit later on, about some of the ways that you might want to, as you're responding to a crisis, what is the level of reporting you do, et cetera, like that. Just to make sure, this is what we see as, a good starting point, covering these areas. Hopefully most of you have that in your program, but we'll also talk a bit about how do we move from this more traditional approach to adding in a resilience component, as well as as Kurt said, getting the executive buy-in, getting your end users buy-in, getting an awareness within your company, et cetera. Sort of the whole culture of resilience within your organizations as well, we'll touch on. I think that's probably enough there, Kurt.
Sure. So as we consider our foundation or a baseline, a lot of us have been doing continuity planning and focused on the creating and updating plans for a while. But as we consider the topic of resilience, what does it mean to be resilient? Not just in our day-to-day operations, but overall. And here it's not just the planning, but it's the response side as well. We know that during an impacting event, time is of the essence, and being able to respond quickly and effectively allows our organization to respond in a manner that allows us to not have a negative impact to the products we provide or the services that we provide to our customers, right? This is a topic that, as we have more and more events happening around the world today, whether they be geopolitical or environmental or technology or cyber related, we need to be able to be nimble and agile in our response. And so having the ability to understand our business and then be able to respond in those manners gives us the ability to plan for multiple types of events and then respond in a moment's notice as well.
Yeah, that's a good comment there, Kurt, that, we know polycrisis is the word I've heard, where it's like, it's not just the supply chain disruption that may be affecting major product lines, but it's the local incident in one of your factories. It's the office disruption. It's the adjacent business that had an issue and the fire trucks are still out front. Or I remember joking with one client years ago, so that entrance into the office park with the gas station right across the street from the only visible entrance to this whole office park, have you considered how people could evacuate if there was a fire at that gas station? It's those little things that can also set you onto an interesting week. What we wanted to talk about, the call outs here from the little honeycomb, I think we were calling it, are really the topics we're going to discuss today. Engaging the business, KPIs and reporting, key performance indicators. I'm the acronym buster within Fusion. KPIs, key performance indicators. If I see an acronym, I'll try to spell it out. And then continuity considerations. So you're going to hear from both back and forth with both Kurt and I. But what we wanted to get to was just kind of, it's going beyond just that single life cycle and thinking beyond the borders of your business continuity organization. And actually soon, coming up, maybe we could even open up that first. No, wait, we changed our polls, the order of the polls. Sorry about that. I was gonna say we're gonna talk a bit about governance, but we can actually touch on that later. So we do wanna make sure that, the key areas we wanna bring up was that engaging the business. So it sort of fits between having effective processes in your program, I'll say broadly, continuity program, resilience program, and that dynamic and current context of what's going on in the world, situational awareness. What are the incidents that might be affecting you? What incidents could be affecting you? What incidents are affecting your suppliers, et cetera? So that's kind of engage the business so that you know what is important to them. KPIs and reporting. How do you report that back to your stakeholders, to use a generic term? But that could be business managers, that could be subject matter experts that are providing you with information about their business processes, that are providing the procedures they would follow in the time of an interruption. What information do they need? What information can the program and you as a practitioner provide to them to keep their processes effectively running? And that starts to then transition to that culture of resilience. And that's where we're going to talk, the last little bit we're going to talk about today is that continuity considerations. Other aspects that you may already be considering, things around longer term planning, some stuff like that. So ultimately, that sort of the middle of our honeycomb here is that proven resilience. You want that proven resilience program and confidence that you've got that. That's where some of the testing and those things come into play as well, so that you're confident that you can identify the impacts of interruptions as well as how you would respond to them.
Yeah. And Mark, I think it's important to acknowledge, I think you touched on it, is we often encourage folks to build a program, right, to continue to mature their program. Well, we need data, we need the structure, we need the engagement from the business, but also the life cycle applied, right? If we don't have a full understanding of how our business operates, of how our company operates, we can't effectively respond. We'll touch on that in a little bit. So love to pop a poll question up, our first poll question up here on the screen. I think that'll come up here in just a second. The question is on the screen here now. There we go. So the question is, what is the primary driver for your resilience strategy today? So if we consider this in the aspect of your program, your company, what is the primary driver? Now, there may be multiple inputs to your program, and that's a good thing, right? But what is the primary driver for your resilience strategy today? See a number of answers coming up now, with regulatory compliance kind of leading the way, and then align with executive priorities kind of in second place there. So we'll go ahead and leave the poll up here and allow folks a chance to answer. There's a lot of inputs to how a program is governed, right? And so we'll touch on that here in a minute.
That's good.
And Mark, if you see anything with the poll there, please feel free to hop on in. But I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next slide here, which is engaging the business. There's a couple themes that we're going to walk through here. The first one is focused on the internal value of sharing and essentially selling our program to our stakeholders internally. We see that with our executives, we see that with management, we see that with our end users. We need to share our program so that it is known within the business and folks understand the benefit and the why of what we're doing in our current program. This is not just related to business continuity or disaster recovery or crisis management, but all aspects of a risk or resilience program, right? So within our organization, the internal value of the culture of resilience. This is something that isn't just bought. It isn't something that isn't obtained overnight. This is something that's bred over time, right? And so we encourage the open communication across leaders, across leadership, across the organization. Responsibility of the different resilience initiatives is shared by all employees. We see that with the phishing campaigns. Click the fish button, right? It's your responsibility. It's each of our own responsibility to do that. Well, that's a similar resilience activity. We're trying to not allow bad actors in. Well, how can we do the same thing for our program? Internally, one of the high value add activities that we see programs that are continuing to mature focus on is some sort of a governance or a steering committee internally. We know that each team, a BC team, a DR team, has got leadership above them. But what about the overall steering committees or governance committees that help guide those programs, that allow the program to have some legs within the organization? right? So this cross-functional group of individuals across maybe the business, IT, leadership, different aspects of the organization, operations, etc., allow a cross-functional group of diverse employees to be able to say, hey, this is where we want, where we see the group today and where we want this team and area to go. We know that many companies have a small BC team or a small DR team, right? There's one or two or maybe three employees or whatever the number is. It's difficult to sometimes get our voice out there. And by having some sort of a governance or a steering committee, that allows us to amplify our voice and share it with leadership as well. We also know that there's multiple different types of end users that we engage with in the business. And some of those are our BIA owners or our plan owners. Some of those are those recovery teams that we work with during an application outage or during a site issue, an evacuation, whatever it may be. So engaging and collaborating with those folks to help understand and help support their programs. We mentioned that cyber phishing example a minute ago. How can we support some of that training alongside that annual activity? And lastly, I'll point out our annual exercises. Many folks do exercises maybe on an annual cadence or a single large exercise for the entire business each year. Well, how are we closing the loop with those employees, right? How are we sharing the lessons learned and the updates that we've made to those plans? How are we saying, hey, because of this activity, we have improved our resilience as a company. We're now more effectively prepared. We're more confident in our ability to respond. Overall, this is a culture. This isn't an overnight shift, but it's an ability to partner with or engage with others in the business to help share the internal value of resilience activities.
And which ties, I think, well back as we're transitioning from looking at that internal value to the telling an impactful story within your organization as well. Just looking back to that poll, regulatory compliance, top driver, as a primary driver, that's the top response, not surprising. But I'm glad to see, personally, that the second highest one was aligned with executive priorities, because that's what we're about to talk about a bit. And also that customer and market expectations, as Kurt was saying, that yes, there's internal value, but it's internal value directed toward the business that we're in, delivering value to our customers. Great.
Yeah. No, that's a good segue, Mark, and appreciate it, because our next topic is focusing on storytelling. Now, maybe some of you grew up with your mom or your dad telling you a story every night before bedtime, and we're going to kind of dig that back out here and telling an impactful story within our organization. But we've got to make sure that that story hits home. We've got to make sure that that story is impactful to the audience that we're telling it to. And so that's where our first point here is aligning our resilience story, the story we're trying to tell and share, with the overall business goals. Maybe those are our annual company priorities that are updated and published on the internet or published out in a 10K, something like that. Maybe those are more internal facing with executive priorities for some company values this year. Well, if we're able to tie those back to how we as resilience professionals are pushing our programs of BC or DR, et cetera, forward, then we're able to kind of hang off the back of those. One of the organizations that I've worked with in the past has had a company value of resilience. Now that's setting the stage for them to be able to take advantage of where the company has their priorities and utilize that to help push their program forward. Next, we want to focus on the actual storytelling of being able to use maybe a recent event or an example of something to share our impactful story, right? So let's just put ourselves into the shoes real quick of maybe an IT leader, a leader in the IT space within your organization. And one morning, you get a call from one of your service desk guys, and there's a lot of reports of users can't log into their machines or their technology. We have multiple critical applications down and services are down, and your service desk is overwhelmed. Well, what's happening? You're faced with an incident, right? How are you going to react? How are we going to react? Well, we just put ourselves into that scenario, and many of us were probably in that scenario last year in July. That was the start of the CrowdStrike incident. Maybe you and your organization were significantly impacted, or maybe you weren't impacted and you saw many others that were impacted. That's an example of a story we can tell, obviously a very short one, with 8.5 million Microsoft Windows systems being put out or having an outage last year. That's going to catch the attention of our leaders or certain teams in the organization, depending on the story that we're telling. So we want to make sure that that story hits home. Let's tell a story that's impactful to our business, to our company, and let's make sure that it's aligned to our executive priorities and our executive goals.
One of the other ways to tell a story that I always like to draw on when I was a practitioner was if there's someone adjacent to you. Maybe it didn't happen to you, but what if it had happened to us? I had several lunch and learn sessions with executives around, we know what just happened to a company geographically near us, in our same vertical, within the same business line as us. The old adage of, don't let a good crisis go to waste. Don't let a competitor's crisis go to waste internally. Let
Absolutely.
your response teams react to that. Let your executives think about what would they have done? How would they have handled it differently? Oh, they do things differently. Yeah, but what if it had happened to us? And often, depending on what industry you're in, you may have some executives that used to work for that competitor. They might have some inside information about, yeah, that really would have hurt them, or it really would hurt us. So it's like getting people thinking and talking among themselves helps raise the visibility of your program as well.
I think this slide seeks to get those gears turning as well, Mark. How can we get executives thinking about what would happen if, right? Sometimes that's a scary question to ask. We're walking in a room and what were to happen if we had X, Y, or Z happen to us? Well, either that's going to go real well and allow us to maybe support the program more, or it's going to turn the audience off a little bit, which isn't the intention, but it provides us some visibility into how our organization thinks about resilience. So on the screen, we have the DRI Annual Risk and Resilience Trends Report from last year. And highlighted here are two things. One are the probability of certain highly impactful events happening. And then the other side on the right is the business impact that we might feel for the same style high impacting event. The focus here is not to go through this list one by one and compare yourself to how would my organization respond, although we could do that. But I would suggest we take one or two or three or a couple of these and compare them to your business. How would your organization respond? Maybe you're a technology company to a cyber outage. That's top of list for both sides. Or maybe you're geographically located where there's a lot of winter storms or maybe hurricanes or things like that. Well, how could this list hit home with maybe a new executive who just joined from elsewhere in the world? Do they understand the importance of why we should be planning for this type of event in our organization? A couple of years ago during COVID, right, 2020, 2021, folks were heavily focused on a pandemic use case for, hey, how would we respond for another pandemic, right? Even in during that timeline as well. Here I'll use the example of maybe you're a homeowner or you own a condo or you're renting an apartment, whatever it may be, and all of a sudden you start to see a water leak coming from your ceiling. Well, if there's a water leaking from your ceiling, you're going to want to figure out where that's coming from, and you're not going to want to spend a couple of weeks or a month or two figuring out where that's coming from. You're going to want to address that now. We can use a story like that to say, hey, for your own program, maybe there's a leaky pipe example that you could tell that about internally. Maybe your IT team has an application that's not doing so hot, or maybe there's a third party, or maybe there's an area of the business that's brand new, and we need to make sure that that area of the business, because of its criticality, is prepared. I think before we move on, Mark, the last comment I think I'll make here is that having good data or having a good understanding of your business, knowing how your business operates, understanding your business is critical, because that allows us to make an informed decision about how we would respond to one of these types of events. Not knowing a full scope of your company or your organization is difficult, right? So let's go ahead and move on. We've got our second poll question here. So we go ahead and pop that up on the screen. Thanks for your participation in that first one. The second poll question here reads, how confident are you in your team's ability or your company's ability to identify the full impact of a disruption within 24 hours. Again, here's the questions up on the screen, the poll, you can answer in the poll. The question is, how confident are you in your team's ability to identify the full impact of a disruption within 24 hours? Now, I understand that many events evolve over time, so we'll set that aside for a second, just focused on the initial impact here. How confident are you? And we'll see those kind of answers pop in here.
It was interesting. The somewhat confidence popped right up as a high answer and stays high. So, yeah, 24 hours may seem like a quick time for you. It may seem like a very long time for you. Some of that might be your industry, your experience, obviously the scale of the incident, a COVID pandemic versus a local flu outbreak, or local school district closing for bad weather or something like that. And all of a sudden, these workers who either were in their office or working from home are suddenly disrupted because they've got kids at home. Obviously we understand there's a difference there, but just wanted to kind of get a sense. It's like, I'm glad to see, actually, feeling fairly confident. Few that aren't confident, so maybe we can help you with that. But kind of just being able to assess what that impact might be, getting that in business terms. Like, so okay, we lost this application. Well, what's that mean? Well, I can go to my continuity program and say, well, that program is used by these 17 processes, 5 of those identified as a critical thing. So those 5 are the business processes that are probably being most disrupted, just kind of getting that level of impact. Great. Yeah, I appreciate the input. And I will remind you, use the chat if you have questions. It's great to see where everyone was coming from, but if you have other questions, I did address one kind of on the side there. Yep, some of our graphics are a little grainy, but there is actually a full report from the DRI. If you're on this webinar, you may already be a member. I have access to that report from last year. The citation was down at the bottom. And actually, while I'm saying that, it's reminding me there's also a handout as we've gone from the chat to the poll. You might have a third tab over there that says for handouts, which is a white paper from Fusion, our employer, on building a business continuity program. You're welcome to download that right here from the webinar, or if you're watching this afterward, I think it'll be associated with the recording as well. So I'll just plug that while we're at it.
Perfect. Mark will go ahead and jump us to the next slide here.
Yeah, so why does all this matter? Why is it helpful to tell stories? Why is, hopefully you all have your own ways of describing why your program is important, but what is it what is the value that your program then delivers to the entire organization? At Fusion, we pride ourselves on having data-driven decision-making. You've got access to the data of your resilience program, and that could be, we've kind of set it to the side about, here we're talking business continuity, IT disaster recovery, risk management, supply chain management, operational resilience. We like to think that as much as possible, as much as you have a cross-functional view and cross-functional collaboration across those groups, that will make the program that much better. If you've got data, if you've got internal collaboration happening and executive support, which we'll touch on again in a couple of minutes, all key to making a sustainable business continuity, focusing on business continuity. If you're disaster recovery, don't be offended, making your programs, plans that proactively meet the needs of the organization. Ultimately, the goal is to minimize downtime, protect those revenue streams, keep the customers, whatever business you're in. You may have a primarily internally focused company. You may deal with a lot of people that are doing administrative type functions, but ultimately it's all to deliver some sort of product or service to an end customer. A number of you mentioned regulatory compliance was one of the drivers of your program. The better data you have, the better you're looking, you and the risk management team, enterprise risk management, operational risk, even, dare I say it, some of you on the call may be, internal audit. If you collaborate and partner with internal audit, that can help you with addressing regulatory compliance. Kurt had mentioned before about a call center, something being interrupted. Keeping that customer confidence maintained, having scripts that call center can pull out and know how to respond to customers even if their system isn't available right now. Keeps the customer confidence, keeps the assurance in your organization, and ultimately supports long-term, I call it sometimes, I joke in some exercises, think of it as a paycheck continuity program, not necessarily a business continuity program. It's the thing that keeps you being paid. It's, hopefully you find meaning in it, but it also keeps the organization operating and hopefully thriving, regardless of the circumstances. excuse me. I want to transition a little bit now into talking about those key performance indicators, KPIs, and reporting metrics broadly. It's a little bit of a theme. Actually, Kurt and I sort of developed these a little bit independently as we married them together. We both came back to telling stories. Ideally, you've got data to back it up and to help reinforce that story, or data to point out we've got some vulnerabilities here that we probably haven't addressed and we weren't even aware of until we started looking at it this way, cross-functionally, et cetera. But my number one, demonstrate the value. Get your executives or every member of the business thinking in terms of how resilience might impact their area, or a lack of resilience and interruption would impact their area. And then think about, so how does your program add value to their area? Again, talk to those either managers, again, I'll say stakeholders, but managers or executives. What are their important metrics? What are their important key indicators? Get them, if you can help them craft a story in their terminology for their department, the value that you've delivered to them, and they can then share that with other department managers, for example. That, I think, has been one of the most powerful things. Instead of me just saying how great this program ought to be, it's them saying, that one little thing that really didn't take me very much time ended up being super valuable when my suppliers suddenly went offline and I couldn't reach them for a period of time. And I was proud that I came up with this little line. I'm sure I'm not the first person to say it, but share the credit to gain credibility. If you've got other department managers talking to each other, talking up the benefit that they've gotten from the resilience program, that just helps you that much more. It gets that buy-in. You start to get the data that you're looking for. It definitely helps things move along. So with that, what is the type of data that you might want to gather? Again, ask those stakeholders, ask those department managers, ask those executives, what is it that what are your metrics that, and honestly, the very quick version is, what causes your bonus to be paid is the very important ones to them personally. But, do you have departmental metrics? Is there something that would be easy, repeatable, and easy to gather from your resilience program that would help sustain their metrics as well, or that you can tie into their metrics? Are there parts of your program that enable parts of their production capability? I said that the couple of bullets there in the middle, keep the metrics as understandable as possible. It's easy for us. I was saying I'm the acronym buster internally at Fusion. It's easy for us to be talking about BIAs and KPIs. And I have I think, sort of humorous example. Operational Resilience talks about important business services. I happen to have seen a bunch of ads in the evening where they were talking about IBS, important business services, in the context of work. But in the context of TV commercials one evening, it was irritable bowel syndrome. So you want to make sure you're specifying, what do you mean by the different acronyms that you're using? If you've got a bunch of abbreviations, figure out the best way to spell it out. What does it mean for people? You want it to be understandable in their terms. That is part of your challenge as the communicator, is to make sure that the audience understands what you're talking about, that it's easy to gather. You don't want to have something where it takes you 3 hours a month to report on a thing that someone flashes up on a slide in 15 seconds every quarter. That is just not a good use of your time. So you want metrics that you can easily get to, but metrics that have meaning, metrics that aren't full of too many, we calculated this and averaged that and multiply by the factor of pi or whatever it is. It needs to be simple and understandable. Ideally, something that you can track over time. Seems to be something that I found in my experience. Often senior people are interested in either trends, I'm spending this much, my spending is going down, our results are going up, is obviously the perfect situation. Often there's anomalies there that you can explain, like you put a little, asterisk on the chart that says, and this is when we acquired that other company. So our spend went up, our operational effectiveness went down briefly, but then it came up and we expect next quarter we're going to surpass our previous metric, et cetera. Being able to see trends is important to senior management. They also like benchmarks. That's a little trickier to get equivalencies around a resilience program, probably. I have had some clients ask, kind of informally, so for a company our size, how many people are on their resilience team? But those, not as formal, but benchmarks and trends, I would say, is probably an important thing. So if the data you're gathering on a regular basis, keep it simple, understandable, repeatable, And if you can trend it, that's great. I just recently attended, I'm actually past president at the Business Resiliency Professionals of Wisconsin. Shout out to the Badgers. I guess we don't have our own mascot, but Badgers of Wisconsin. We just had a presentation this past month around metrics and KPIs. It was interesting. Stuart Murray, maybe a name that some of you know, he was talking about kind of 3 areas that he had focused on in a plan that he had gone through. He's got a great case study that he presented around completion. So that's like, are people actually filling out all the parts of a BIA? Are people actually completing all the parts of their plan? Just completion. Are they doing the tests? That the policy, which goes back to governance, if you've got governance and a policy that says you need to do a test every year, you need to update your business impact analysis every year, et cetera. Are people doing that? Are they completing them as they should? The quality is the data good? Do you have a level of confidence in it? I'll just, to introduce it now, this is a place where generative AI might be able to assist. You can feed in a plan or the paragraphs that are describing dependencies or different parts of your plans into a generative AI and say, what might be missing? Take in all of these different departments that are sort of related to each other. Are there common applications? Is there 1 or 2 of these business impact analyses that don't seem to have all the same dependencies that the other ones do? Let an AI help you do some of that analysis as well. But completion, that would be quality, kind of how well are things defined, how well are they described, and then ultimately compliance is, are they, if people are doing their BIAs, are they completed on time? Have they been approved at the right levels of the organization? Has testing occurred? Back to Kurt was just mentioning the after action reports and things like that. Are those being done on a timely basis, et cetera? So metrics are in there. There are other sources that will give you more specifics about the types of metrics you might want to gather. I will say Stuart's presentation to BRPW this month, a couple of weeks ago, it was disaster recovery focused, but I could easily take that analogy and make that fit for a business continuity context. So just because someone isn't talking about your specific area, don't discount it. And then just third on this slide, the reporting. How do you create the reports for those stakeholders for that first one? You want to demonstrate that value, but how do you communicate with them? Is that something that you make a dashboard of? How do you publish it? Is it something you put out on a SharePoint site? Is it within your tool? I've also found, much like sort of my industry experience of executives are interested in benchmarking and trends. I've also found that reporting tends to have 3 audiences. So there's the people that are your subject matter experts. They're providing the data for the BIAs. They're providing the procedures for your plans. They need a level of reporting about, what do I need to get done? What are my deadlines? What needs to be updated? Those types of things. You at a program management, I'm assuming most of the people on this call are kind of managing parts of your program. You're responsible for multiple plans or the entire program or a region of the world, for example. How well are we doing is probably the question you want to answer. Like, how many plans do I have? Are they up to date? What is their quality? How complete are they? Those types of things. You're looking beyond a single plan across multiple plans. And then that executive, that often dashboards is an easier way for executives to consume information if it's clear, if you haven't got too much jargon in those dashboards. That lets you gain the support, identify those vulnerabilities that might not have come up through other, just each subject matter expert looking at their area. You've got that view, you can present that to an executive and say, we have a potential vulnerability here. We've got a lot of dependence on this one vendor that may not have been highlighted before, just through changes in the business. And again, be able to tell a story through those dashboards and reports. And I probably went longer there than I should have, Kurt, but I think we've got another poll. I also see some questions flying by, which is great.
Yeah, we'll jump to the next poll, which is our last poll here up on the screen now. How well do your resilience program goals align with broader strategic or business goals? It's going to set the stage for Mark's conversation around KPIs and metrics. Where are your resilience program goals coming from? This kind of feeds back to aligning with our executives. But are these coming from your business, from your business's goals, your organization's goals? Are they coming from elsewhere? And I'll leave the poll up here. Maybe we can leave the poll up for a couple seconds, and Mark, I'll go ahead and continue here.
Yeah, I like that we get to keep those polls up. That's nice. Sometimes we've had to pull those down just to, because it's filling the screen. So it's great that it's off to the side. So how might you present some of this? So I was just saying about the reports, dashboards, et cetera. In the Fusion system, we've got a number of different ways of doing it. A dashboard like this would actually have the details behind it, often clickable. So, it's like I want to see for those, talk about small print. I'm going to zoom in with my manual zoom in here around business continuity plans or crisis management plans. What stage of approval are they in? Just break it out in a donut chart or a pie chart or something like that to say, and again, you want easily understandable. So the keys at the bottom, green means approved, red means not submitted. Maybe the colors even have specific meanings so that you can glance at it and know from a distance, like, yep, green and red. Green is bad, red is good. I said that the other way around. Green is good, red is bad. Just checking that you're all paying attention. And that one over on the right, similarly with business impact analysis, maybe that's a review process, a review cycle that it goes through, et cetera. Just which ones are under review, which ones have been completed, which ones are past due. Sometimes that's a meaningful statistic as well. If you've got governance in place, you might report this on a monthly or a quarterly basis, for example. Just where do things stand? We have this many plans, we have this many BIAs. How many are current? How many have been approved? If we're on an annual cycle, is that everybody has the same date that they're due, or does that get staggered throughout the year? A couple of different methodologies that I deal with our clients on as well. I think the next one gets into a little bit about, maybe, so that first one is a bit more operational, important for you and important for things that your steering committee might be interested in. I think this one, the idea here is another sample of a dashboard in the Fusion system, but the concept is identifying what are the assets that are important to your organization. What facilities, applications, suppliers, staff, other resources are important to the processes. What has been identified in the business processes? A subject matter expert knows, in order for me to do my thing, I need this building and this application and these other resources. But for you to be able to present a broader view and say, what are overall the most critical facilities? What overall are the services we get from multiple vendors? Are there multiple vendors for some of those services, or are they critical services where we only have a single source vendor? You can expose that asset concentration at the bottom of this very small slide. On the left is a chart, on the right is more of a tabular format, a report format for the scope of what the filters are showing. Up at the top, in this case, the way that this works, you could filter by division. If you're having a conversation with your steering committee, maybe you show everything. If you're having a separate conversation with the head of a division, you could zoom into that and show just their division. What are the key facilities, etc.
I'll hop in here because I think, the two things that I wanted to add. One is around risk. When we're reporting on our organization, reporting on the operational side or the status side is impactful, right? We need to understand the whole lay of the land. I've been working with a company recently who does not have a view of their entire view of their vendor ecosystem. They've got vendors or third parties in multiple systems, and they don't have a good view of that list from an entire company view. And so that restricts us from being able to report on our metrics of where the risk may lie in the organization. Of course, we're good to go when there's a green sign or when we're confident in recovery. But the fact that that's not always the case. Maybe a vendor's RTO is a lot longer than what the business needs. And those are other types of things that we may want to report on and across maybe some of these different aspects or these different assets within your program.
Yep. Okay. I'm still looking for a great use of that speedometer gauge, by the way. It's that purple one, it's pegged. I'm like, that could be a good thing, that might be a bad thing. But the different visualizations can actually help tell the story, back to that theme that Kurt and I came up with independently and as we brought it together. This is another view. I was saying early on, I mentioned, we'll touch a bit on incidents. Maybe this is a dashboard. Again, realize it's a little bit smaller. Once you've got the recording, you can zoom in on your screen, but basically it's saying, what are the active incidents affecting our organization? What are the areas that are being impacted by sort of pillars was the term that we had sort of used in this case, but it's like processes, there was no data. Facilities, there weren't any data, but we got some applications that are being interrupted. We've got suppliers that are interrupted. We've got people that are being interrupted. Out of these 21 live incidents that are either in progress or, let me see that really small print, but a couple different colors. So again, the colors, breaking it out, showing it graphically, bars next to each other, as opposed to just a chart with a bunch of numbers. That helps. In many cases, that can help people identify that, quickly identify their own trends. Like, what is that black box? Why is that much higher? Kind of, so see the status, see the numbers. Beneath that, couple of charts, which are actually number of incidents opened over time, or incidents closed over time. So a few opened here, that little peak, but have not yet closed. So there might be some longer term incidents that you're dealing with. Again, by having a dashboard like this, it helps you remember to update your data. If you're going to brief your steering committee or an executive on a quarterly basis, you make sure that your data is up to date, so that you can present that to them. If they're interested in seeing those trends, what are those open? Are there any particular issues? Is there a long-term resource need or something that you need the executive support to help close out one of these 21 open incidents? Slightly different view, and the visualization I like to show off. Beneath that is the map of the world, obviously. That shows that where those active incidents are geographically. We even got the blue dots are representing our company sites, the purple dots are suppliers' sites. So again, I could click into any of those sites, get more details. There's a summary sort of chart or table at the bottom, giving me some of the statistics about each of those incidents. I could scroll through and find them, or if I click on the dot near, one of them looks sort of near Detroit or Chicago, I guess, to see what is impacted, what was the cause of that incident, how long has it been open, those type of statistics, just quickly at a fingertip. So if you had this dashboard up live in, for example, a steering committee meeting, you could really drill right into that level of detail. Again, helps tell the story. You might want to kind of have an idea of what story you want to tell before you go in. But this is a way to represent it a couple of different ways. A graph over time, geographic, zoom in on the map. What are the areas that are impacted? If I'm talking to the head of facilities, facilities, I don't have any right now. If I'm talking to the head of IT, there are current impacts on the IT organization, on applications. That's something worth having a conversation with. If you're talking with HR, there's one incident that involves people, for example. So having those pillars at the top. And again, these types of dashboards, often, depending on the tool you're using, you can filter them different ways. So if you've got the data underneath it, then you can present it multiple ways for the particular audience.
Yeah. And I think, the same topic we were talking about earlier of what's the story you're trying to tell? What is the focus that you have from your program? Let's make it impactful. So the same story that you're telling earlier allows us to report on said metrics over time, right? Mark will go ahead and pop us to our last, second to last slide here,
Yep, coming in
around some of those
right on
continuity
time
considerations. First off, as we talk about telling a story, it's important that we think about as practitioners, not just the today, tomorrow, the next day. We're thinking about the 3 years, the 5 years from now. How do we continue to look forward about what does a successful program in my company look like 5 years from now? What do I want it to look like? And we know that annual life cycles take a while. It takes a good bit of time to get budget approval, things like that. But we've got to look forward. What does success look so we can tell that story and then work backwards from there? A couple other things to consider here are aspects that you might have on the back burner of your program today. One of those is your activities that you have with your critical vendors. Many organizations are relying heavily on third parties and vendors to support their business today in many of their day-to-day operations, and they're acting on behalf of your organization. That means that their visibility and the services that they provide are also underneath your name. Because of that, we need to make sure that for those critical vendors, or especially those top vendors or third parties that we have in our organization, we're conscious of their programs as well, both from a monitoring standpoint, making sure that they're saying that they are providing what that they're providing what they say they're providing. And maybe that's an opportunity to link in for a joint exercise, especially if your critical vendors, your top 10 or something like that, your executives are going to know those vendor names, right? Those are going to be common vendors within your company. That's an opportunity to tell that story of, hey, if X, Y, or Z vendor went down, well, yes, we know that it would be a heavy impact, but we've exercised with them. We know what their response will be. Mark?
Yeah, actually catching up on questions while you were chatting there, but it's like there's I bring it up on examples with clients right on a regular basis. What if one of your key suppliers, one of your critical vendors was acquired by your competitor? I've experienced that in a past life. That was very disruptive to the business for them to think about. But really, just to stay on time here, I'll move on to, I touched on generative AI before. One of the ways, many different ways you can use it. We're still working out the best use cases even within our Fusion tool, but other ways, I'll plug another professional. Shane Matthew has done a lot of great presentations. Actually, this coming month, Jason Haas is going to join BRPW again and talk about AI uses within the business continuity, the resilience space, I'll say, disaster recovery, risk, et cetera. There's a lot of interesting ideas out there. Actually, so there's a couple of names. I'll say them again slowly. Stuart Murray, Murray, I think it was. I should know. I'm the one who coordinated him coming to talk to us, was talking about metrics. I just mentioned Shane Matthew. I think he's got the word stone in the name of his consulting firm. I can't think of it all. And then Jason Haas. They've got some great ideas, Shane and Jason, around AI. I mentioned before, running your existing plans or sets of BIAs through a generative AI and say, okay, what might be missing from any of these departments' BIAs, for example. So it can quickly look through and say, depending on the format that you've got your data in. Another area we're seeing it within the Fusion tool as well is to provide insights. So given the record that I'm sitting, given on the part of the department that I'm looking at, or the part of the organization I'm looking at, what are areas that might be lacking from this plan based on the AI being able to kind of take in an overview of the whole company and the entire program? Just some different ideas there. I will say I used some of Shane's ideas to help create a great tabletop exercise fairly quickly with a couple of injects that I would not have thought of. So helping design tabletop exercises as well could be helpful if you're looking for ideas there. Follow-up questions to have. It saved me a bunch of time, to be honest. And I want to say that incorporating resilience into the budget, I can't remember if I was going to focus on this or you were, Kurt, but basically the idea is in that 3 to 5 year cycle, are there changes happening in the business that you should make sure as part of your policy and governance for the resilience program, that if they're bringing in a new system, they need to account for disaster recovery of that system. Okay. If they're bringing in a new mission critical system and it's in the cloud, they need to make sure that their contract is funding not only the resilience, the fallback zone in the cloud, but also the time it will take to test the failover from zone to zone, for example. And within your own group, if there are technology advances that you would like to take advantage of, get them into your long-term thinking. Start to, plant that seed with the boss. Like, if I had that other reporting tool, I could, I spent 2 hours every month on metrics. If I had a great tool, I could just pop these out real quick, whatever it may be. So there's effects in the business, and there's also the planning that you want to do for your own resilience program and the tools that you have access to.
Okay. Mark, I'll go ahead and close us out here on this last slide. Got a couple things that are on the slide. Just at the top here are some of the topics we've covered already. But Mark, before we open up questions, I'll just leave us with this last sentence here, which is at the very bottom. Our goal for proactive resilience, our goal for this area of the perspective of resilience is enhancing our planning activities, which enable a quicker, more effective, and more confident response times to an incident, which ultimately ensures that we receive uninterrupted product and service delivery to our customers. That's the goal. That's the focus there at the end, right? We want our end customer, the user of our platform or the service or whatever it is we provide, to have uninterrupted services or product delivery, right? And because of that, we need to understand our business. We've got to have effective mapping of our organization, understand the data that we have, and then that allows us to find and see and solve the gaps that we see within the business. We can't just operate in the continual manner of creating new plans year by year, right? That's a compliance activity, which some of our programs are compliance related. However, to actually be resilient, we've got to go that next step. Mark, should we go ahead and pop to some of the questions?
I'm just glancing through the questions you might have while I was speaking as well. It looks like we got a couple of answers. Other people in the audience answered a couple of the questions, which I am agreeing with everything I see here. Rodney asked about the first question around compliance and regulations. It depends, is there sort of a flavor of the day? How do you balance what the regulation says versus the guidance that people are getting? And if the guidance at the top is not being followed by people closer, that's a challenge. But I see Brenda gave a very a nice, concise answer there. I've never experienced that when I was a practitioner. Of course, everyone followed all of our policies. No, there is, it's a reality. I guess I would say if you're writing a policy, or if you have an opportunity to have influence on a policy, or you're working with a steering committee, get them thinking about what does good look like? What does good enough look like? Which actually, as I'm reading the next question from Andrew here, was what are some of the ways you measure quality? And actually someone else also, Jacqueline, I think it was here, asked about getting access to that meeting. I assume that would be the recent BRPW session about metrics. I will make sure I'll figure out the best way to get that to you. I'll put it that way. But yes, that is available if you ask. Obviously we hold those for our membership, but I'm happy to share that. But some of those all sort of relate together. How do you measure quality? Stuart had a way that he talked about it. That might be another use for AI, would be to say, write the general prompt that says, I want to evaluate the following process descriptions on the basis of understanding the inputs, the outputs, the dependencies. Look for, if you create a common prompt and then run the different descriptions through it, that would be a way for you to kind of score it and let the AI kind of give you a sense of, how many of those key points that I expect to be here are actually covered here. That might be a way to look at it, which actually also ties. Yep, go ahead, Kurt.
I was going to say, from a quality perspective, and then we kind of bridged another question on AI real quick, but
exactly,
from a policy, or excuse me, a quality perspective, I think there's an aspect of internal approvals. We
yes,
as resilience professionals aren't the experts of the business.
right.
However, we understand the content and format of a continuity plan, et cetera. And so we should let the leadership and the related departments review, specifically leadership, review and approve their own plans, right? Because that allows the buy-in and sign off of the content. Now, there's an aspect of us understanding the business, knowing where the gaps are, and being able to spot those, to make sure that our recovery plans spot those gaps. But that doesn't put the onus on us. Secondarily, I think, Mark, one of the other questions I saw around AI, which you were kind of just chatting on, was, maybe there's some risk to running content through an AI, and that's a fair question, right?
And I think Dave said it. It's like, if you've got a private AI instance, would be the place I was thinking of. You don't want to put your business continuity plans out, because that potentially shows the scenarios you're concerned about. It would give you an adversary or a competitor information that you would not want out there. So absolutely, yeah. Do not take what I said as put your business continuity information out in a public AI. Definitely do not. Looking for more of a private one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You don't want the AI trained on your business continuity data.
I think there's companies are becoming more and more strict, although excited to utilize AI. I was talking with a large services firm earlier this morning, actually, and they're very excited about using AI all throughout the organization. Very well-known company. And that being said, they want to make sure that it's done in a smart manner. So what does the AI that they're using? It's keeping their data within that org, right? Within that instance. It's not training the model. It's compliant with things like ISO AI certification, right? Is that something that the model that you're using? So there's ways to do that in a smart manner, even from a scalable manner across all companies.
I just realized we're sitting on the same. If you could advance one more slide, just so we've got a little QR code there if anybody wants to reach us directly. If we don't get a chance in the last 30 seconds here, we probably had to wrap it up. You can request a demo. You can also ask a question. Hey, I was on that webinar. I'm looking for a follow-up. So feel free to ask those questions as well. And I don't want to get partway into a question and realize that we're probably all have to drop for our next meetings. But some great questions. We'll try to answer ones through email if we have to. Nothing looks like it's jumping out. I mean, I see Bobby's question about how often might you pause during an incident to kind of figure out when do you regroup. It depends on the incident, honestly, from my experience. I would love to think that I'm probably doing some sort of an executive briefing every 3 to 4 hours, maybe. So we had a cadence at a company I used to work for around hurricane season, where we got local site information. We went up to our sort of the crisis management group. It wasn't technically the crisis management team. Then the IT team met after that. So it was actually a series of meetings that happened on that case. It was once a day as the forecasts were updated. But there may be a sequencing of meetings that need to happen as well. So that if you're in the role of reporting to management, you may need to do that report every twice per shift or something like that, every 4 hours, say, which means you're going to want to get the details, the technical details, a good half hour before that. So there might be some different cadence to those meetings. So it sort of depends. Sorry, no good answer there. and I wasn't going to jump into a question, but I did anyhow. Kurt, anything else that jumped out at you that you think we can answer quick?
No, I think we're out of time. So just wanted to close this out with thank you all for your participation in the polls, questions. Thank you so much for your time today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.